What inspired me to be a photographer and which among my works are my favorites and why? I think I kind of addressed these already. Certainly, um, in addition to just kind of the right circumstances with my travel plans and with my dog, um, it was not in a small part related to some of the people in my life at that time. I certainly had a friend who was a very serious hobby photographer, and discussions with her kind of led to that. And I was introduced to somebody who's now a good friend, who was a public relations director at a humane society, and that she was also a creative individual, having gone to art school, and working with her was was um, was also a very important early influence, and so I think those things kind of led to where I am today. And again, in terms of what's my favorite and why, certainly family photographs and my own dogs, those rank up there because they have a lot of meaning to me. Images that really reflect my creative vision, and I've talked about some of those here already, can certainly qualify. And there's definitely some that are in my book that I would say are among my favorite, especially the cat book. See if I can pull up some of those pictures quick. In terms of my Shelter Cats book, this is one of my favorite ones here, and this is one of my other favorites. And these, it's probably worth pointing out that while I enjoy cats, I'm really a dog person, but those two are probably among my favorite animal photographs that I've ever created. There we go. Oh, I guess I missed out on the why. The why, because they've captured shape and moment in a way that I just find very compelling. The lines that we get here from the tail down through the legs. Same thing here. The way that the legs are kind of crossed, the lines that we get here, followed through. Those are things that visually I really enjoy. And this one, for the abstract nature of it, the way he's reaching out, covering up the eye, you really need to kind of think about what you're seeing here before it really kind of clicks. If this is a kind of image where if you first glance at it and then kind of look away, you don't necessarily understand what you're seeing. So that's the whys. How do you take a good picture of a reflective surface, and favorite kind of camera? So for me, my favorite kind, I use Canon cameras, and my favorite current camera here is the 5D Mark III. It's just a phenomenal camera. I also shoot with a variety of cameras. An older one I use is a Canon Mark 1DS Mark III. Great image quality. I'm kind of a throwaway camera almost that I use is a Canon T4i. It does a really nice job for a pretty small price tag. And so it just kind of depends on what project I'm doing as to which camera I'll use. In terms of reflective surface here, the key is polarizing filters. Polarizing filters are, I'm sure you've probably seen or worn polarizing sunglasses at some point, and how it darkens the sky. That's an important reason why people might get one, but the reason that these filters are so important for, I think, all photographers is because it helps you to manage reflections. So you put this thing on the front of your lens, and if you have it turned one way, you might get a complete reflection of everything outside the window. So if you turn it the other way, it's going to take that reflection away, and you're going to be able to shoot through it. And it's almost magical the way that this thing works. there's almost no photographer that I can think of that wouldn't benefit from having a polarizing filter in their kit. It's just that useful. And whether it's reflections or whether you're a landscape photographer, taking fall leaf shots, and you want to get all the color. Well, if you think about it, leaves are almost always a little bit waxy, and that means a lot of reflection. And so because of that, you get duller colors. If you use a polarizing filter, then you manage that reflection and you get deeper saturated colors. And so, if you're shooting metal, if you're shooting glass or anything reflective, it can make a huge difference. Now, depending on the kind of glass, you may just be out of luck. Obviously, if you're shooting something that's made to be mirrored, then you're not really going to be able to manage that reflection, because that's just the way that it was designed. But for everything else, polarizing filter, it's huge. And it's really not that expensive in terms of kit. You can buy inexpensive ones. It depends on the size of your lens, for maybe $50, or if you want a really expensive one, maybe $300. Do I shoot RAW and creating art? Yes. And what kind of camera do I use? I've already talked about that. Do I see a dramatic difference in quality? Yes, there's a difference in quality. So for the JPEG versus RAW, I always shoot RAW. There's definitely a few genres where it might be useful to shoot JPEG. One of the most practical ones would be for a wedding photographer. Now, if you shoot JPEG, you have limitations. First of all, you set up your camera, and it will apply the same kind of settings to all your cameras in terms of contrast and saturation and sharpness. And one size doesn't necessarily fit all, no matter what you're doing. So that's a limitation. And the second limitation is that a JPEG by default, by definition rather, is an 8-bit image. An 8-bit image only has a certain amount of information contained in it, whereas a RAW file these days is going to be 12 or more likely these days even a 14-bit image. There's more information you're capturing. Plus you have a lot more flexibility in the way that you can edit your image. I showed a little earlier how you can change the white balance settings for a shot and completely change the look. These are things that you could do with a JPEG image, but it would have a very, very much degraded quality about it. Because this is a RAW image, it doesn't negatively affect anything that I'm doing here, and so I can change things and have and be able to make an excellent print. The other thing is you have a lot of exposure latitude, so if you're a little bit overexposed, you can bring this back down, or if you're a little underexposed, you can bring it back up, and you can get detail that you wouldn't get if it was a JPEG. And for me, that is absolutely enough to make it so that I only shoot in RAW. Everything that I do is about the final image quality, and I think that a RAW file is going to allow that more than a JPEG. Okay, dog questions. Teaching a photography class is actually not that difficult for a number of reasons. First of all, a large part of beginning photography, at least, is learning the technical aspect. So anytime that you have things you would discuss, like aperture settings and shutter speed settings and ISO settings and exposures, those are things that are pretty easy to discuss, especially in an online format. It makes it very easy. You can put together your little visuals. The next part, once assuming that you get the technical aspect down, it comes down to refining a vision, and that is actually not such a bad thing online too. There are practice is key, and seeing images is key to learning. what makes a good composition, or you know, developing your creative vision. Um, While a lot of photography and art is subjective, there are generalizations that are commonly understood to result in good imagery. And so when one of my students, photography students, sends me an image, then I'll say, okay, this is stuff that you've done well. It's well exposed. You have nice focus on details, whatever. And then I'll say, well, maybe you might consider changing your composition a little bit this way, or maybe you would consider adding a little bit of light here, or doing a little bit different editing here. And the more of that kind of feedback that you get, the more that you develop your own style, or a style. And of course, the risk is that you kind of become a clone of whoever your instructor is. But the important thing is that well, early on you kind of you need to follow the advice of whoever's giving it to you. But as you develop and as you continue to have more practice, then you start to say, oh, I see what he's saying, and then you apply that to future work, and you don't necessarily apply everything that you say, but you apply the things that are that you think are most relevant to any particular image, and that's really how you learn how to do photography or any sort of creative subject. Lighting is important just because light is important to any visual aspect. If you're in a dark room, you're not going to see much. Same thing. If you're in a dark room, you're not going to take any good photographs. If you're out in the middle of the day, your colors are going to look washed out. Compared to if you're out shooting at sunset, the colors are richer. So basically, lighting is significant because it changes the mood of an image, but also because the way that the light falls on your subject will have a very important role in how that subject is perceived within the photograph. So if you're taking a picture of, for example, your friends out when you're hiking, and you're up on top of Badger Mountain, if you just let your camera do completely automatic exposure, chances are your image is going to be well exposed for the landscape, but your subjects, your friends, are going to be underexposed. And so knowing that if you turn on your flash even on a bright sunny day, is going to make your friends properly exposed too. That's an essential part of lighting, and that's a very significant part of that photograph. So hopefully that makes sense. Stock photography, we've already talked about that. How do you get started in the business of photography? Basically, most people will decide that, oh, hey, I'm a good photographer, and then I'm going to start charging people. And that's the most common way. A lot of people will, there are a lot of photographers working today who bought their first real camera when they had children, and then started photographing their kids, and then they started photographing their kids' friends, and that's kind of how they kind of built into it. Photography degrees are I think useful in the way that any kind of undergraduate degree is useful. I think in terms of running a successful small business, a marketing and or business degree is probably more important than having a creative degree. I think that having sound business skills is going to be important in so many ways. First of all, a huge mistake I see time and time again is people will charge, say $75 for a session, and then give away a CD of images. That is basically paying somebody else to work for them, because there's no possible way that it takes into account all of the things that go into running a business. Owning your own, buying your own equipment, buying the software, buying your insurance, buying the electricity that you use to power your laptop. All of those things need to be factored into pricing, and those are things that business people are probably going to understand more fundamentally than people that just start taking pictures and start charging for it. That said, whether you approach it from a creative degree or a business degree, or with no degree whatsoever, all of these things can be learned on the job. It's just a matter of taking the time to actually learn it. So hopefully that answers. So taking fine art pictures, is there a subject that I tend to capture? It really just kind of depends on what might strike my fancy at any given time. As you go through life, you kind of have ideas that'll stick out here and there, and the ideas that kind of keep coming back to you, and maybe something you saw on TV, or maybe something you saw in a paper, or maybe even just the way that you saw light kind of playing and filtering through trees as you're walking to school. Things that capture your interest probably can be made into a fine art project. Now does that mean that, oh, hey, that's kind of fun, I'm going to snap a picture of it? No, you need to percolate on these things, and you need to live with them before you start shooting. And even after you start shooting, you might think, oh, well, this is kind of fun, but it'd be even better if I did it this way. And that's kind of the creative process that I take, and it can really be anything that kind of starts that initial process. And it depends on what's going on in my life. So if everything's going perfectly well, then I might be taking more upbeat kind of shots. If I'm particularly stressed out about something, then probably those projects are going to be a little bit more frantic, or maybe a little more edgy, or conveying some darker emotions. So it just kind of depends, and it's kind of a weak answer, maybe saying it depends, but I don't think that it's fair to say that there's just one way or another, because I think that there's so many different ways to approach a fine art project, that or even a subject, that I don't think I can narrow it down that much. I do have some experience with light photography. It's been a long time since I've done that kind of thing, and one of the things that I enjoy doing is you can get these LED flashlights now that have different colors, and they make for a fun sort of they make for a fun way to do this, because not only can you do these kind of shapes, but then you can start to add some colors in there too, and it takes a lot of trial and error. Mostly I don't do it because I think I'm at my best creatively during the morning, and obviously these are the kinds of things that are best done, well, best done isn't even it, that can only be done in dark, in night, and so I think I just don't work creatively as well at that time of day. But certainly, yeah, absolutely, it's a fun thing to do. I enjoy it when I do it. Significant influences, I think it was just a matter of a lot of things kind of coming together at the right time. I really didn't have any sort of background in the arts. My undergraduate degree is biology. I did cancer research for a number of years, and as I kind of went through, I kind of chose the camera that I did at that time almost on a whim, more than anything else, or more than any sort of real reasoning behind it. And all of these things had come together. The people I was living near and friends with at the time, all of those things kind of came together as to why I started photography. And it's just one of those, one thing led to another kind of deals. At that point, I had retired from cancer research and was looking for new hobbies. I instantly enjoyed the photography. Decided to take a few classes and enjoyed the classes so well that I obviously I started to take more and more of them, and eventually enrolled in the graduate program. Do I have to work really hard to be good, or does I have a natural eye? I think I had a little bit of a natural eye. I think that, like anything, in order to do it well, you have to practice with it. And even now, I've been doing it for a number of years, and have earned a degree in photography. If I'm away from it for a while, I feel like I'm a little rusty. And so, the more you do it, the better you are. And, is it hard work? Some days it's hard, but, mostly it's something that I just really enjoy doing. And in the same way that, any sort of thing that you enjoy doing, you just do it. You don't really think about it as being work. And so, yeah, it definitely takes a lot of practice, but it's practice in the way that I enjoy watching a good movie, or reading a good book, or hiking or something like that. It's just a part of my regular life. And anytime that you give something that much emphasis in your life, you're going to develop some good skills. Favorite subjects to capture and why? It just really kind of depends on the mood. Certainly my own family and my dogs are going to be way up there for obvious reasons. I like working with animals in general. I like working with landscapes. I think I said this before, but I had to re-record some of this, so I maybe didn't. But I've moved around a lot in life, and before I get ready to move, I undertake a large series of landscape pictures of the place that I lived. It's kind of my way of saying goodbye, and in my way of remembering the area. And so I did that in the Tri-Cities. I did that when I was in Kentucky. I feel like I need to live with a place before I can start to photograph it. And now I've been in Tucson for a year and a half. I feel like I'm only just now starting to get to the point where I might entertain doing a series of images here, because for me, I need to know an area in order to approach it in a meaningful kind of way. And so I guess the common thread here is favorite subjects are things that I know well. And whether that's family, whether that's locations, or whether I'm completely making something up, within my own mind, whether it's getting into the macro stuff and showing different stuff, or doing something like this where I'm creating shapes and colors. All of those things can be very satisfying, but it's really kind of all a reflection of me, and so I guess that's what makes it my favorite subject, is it's got some sort of personal connection to it. Favorite technique, I'm not sure I can say. I certainly love macro stuff pretty well, and I certainly am coming to enjoy micro photography as well. I've never done any daguerreotypes, and I think that would be a whole lot of fun. I've done a number of other old historic techniques, and I really enjoy it a lot. And I can see myself doing that at some point. The biggest limitation is, and really, well, I mean, time is always a limitation, but the real limitation has been I don't have a darkroom, and until I build one for myself, and it's probably on the to-do list, somewhere down the road. Until I have a darkroom to work in, it's not really practical to do that kind of technique. I think daguerreotypes would be on the list, and the other one would be the wet plate collodion process, which, depending on how much you know about the history of photography, the daguerreotypes were one of the early sharp images, but the competing process was designed by Foxtel, but which was more of like the current thing where you would make a negative image and then you could make prints from that. The problem with that was that they weren't sharp, and very soon after that they realized that if they made their negatives on glass, then they could make sharp images that would rival the daguerreotypes. And so a lot of the old historic photographs that you see are either going to be daguerreotypes or they're going to be wet plate collodions, and I think either of those techniques would be a whole lot of fun to experiment with. But you need to have some pretty serious setups for that, because those chemicals are very toxic, and you need fume hoods. You need to have dark rooms to work with in order to do that without the fume hoods to do it without developing pesky things like cancer. Is there a way to do multiple exposures in camera, and resources that I would recommend? That image is almost certainly done in Photoshop, not in camera. The reason that you can tell is because this background here is uniform. If this was a landscape and a portrait combined in camera, you would see some variation. You would see maybe some clouds. You would see maybe whatever the background is here, but it wouldn't be so uniform. Obviously, back in the old film days, it was easy. You could take a picture, not advance the film, and then take another picture and do that. Today, it's pretty much all done in post-production. Photoshop is the obvious choice. In terms of cameras, I've read, and I don't remember the details, but there's a specialty camera that will allow you to do this, but I would have a really hard time recommending that, because that's letting the camera make these creative choices for you. If you're going to do a digital combining anyways, why wouldn't you just go ahead and do it where you can decide exactly how these things line up? Because otherwise, maybe what you'd find is that instead of having the hair kind of blend seamlessly in with the castle, or whatever this is, maybe it would be covering up part of her face or whatever. So doing it in Photoshop gives you more control. If you wanted to just do it with a regular camera and take it to chance, then I would say the best way to do that would be to use a bulb mode, where you would open the shutter and keep the shutter pressed so you're having exposure open, but then control the exposure in a secondary way. And so probably the easiest thing to do would be put the lens cap on your camera, open the shutter, remove the lens cap, put the lens cap back on, and then compose your next image, and then remove the lens cap, and then close it, and then close the shutter in that way. That's probably going to be the best way to do that with just a regular camera. Otherwise, again, specialty equipment, and even better Photoshop or something like that. In terms of resources, classes, definitely depends on what you're looking for. I mentioned earlier lynda.com, lynda.com. It's kind of expensive for the subscription. You can get the premium for, I think it's 38, and the regular for 25. Premium gives you access to files to work with. This is a really good way to learn software, and so there's all sorts of things, Photoshop or whatever, that you can access there. But they also have some really good overviews of techniques and different gear that's out there, and so I find it useful in that way. Of course, YouTube, you can find most things out there on YouTube. There are a number of workshops that you might consider. Santa Fe workshops are a good one. Art Wolf, based out in Seattle, does a number of them. Tim Gray, he's also Seattle. Basically, if you have a subject that you enjoy, you can probably find a workshop that's centered around that. And the other thing is, get an internship, or even pay somebody for education. Now, not every photographer is going to be open to that, and even those that are, not every photographer is going to give you equally good experience. I would recommend that you first look for people who you're inspired by, and then a secondary consideration is if they enjoy teaching. And so lots of photographers these days will teach webinars, or they'll teach at conferences, or at different workshops, or even old-fashioned colleges and universities. And so those people might be willing to take you on as an intern, or they might be able to, or willing to teach you on a one-on-one basis for whatever their fee might be. But definitely workshops I would recommend, and definitely some place like lynda.com. If you have an interest in photography, perhaps professionally, you can join as I think they call it an associate member, but of the Professional Photographers of America. And as part of that membership, you can see hours and hours and hours of webinars that will teach you any number of different things, from posing to lighting. ASMP, Associated American Society of Media Photographers, same sort of thing, although to a much lesser extent in terms of video libraries. But those are probably the places where I would start. Okay, so here we got the last one. What got me motivated in the arts of photography? I've already talked about kind of the specific events that kind of led up to it. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that when I went back to school for photography, I did it as a personal enrichment student, and it was kind of luck of the draw. I saw an ad for Academy of Art University and signed up for it and enjoyed it so well that I applied to graduate school there. There are a number of places that will let you do online degrees or take online classes, and it was kind of luck that I went there, because I think it suited my needs very well in retrospect. So I'm sure you all know that I teach at the Art Institute through their online campus, and that is a very technically oriented program. You learn about f-stops, you learn about lighting ratios, and you learn that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And I don't fully I mostly don't subscribe to that philosophy. Yes, you need to understand the technical, but for me, you have to embrace the creative as well. Going to the Academy of Art was a different experience, because it is first an art school, not a technical school. So if you look at the other programs that a school offers, you might get an idea for this. So some of the other schools, or some of the other things that you might learn at the Art Institute are graphic design, maybe you might learn hospitality management, you might learn how to become a chef. So these are things that, yes, absolutely, they have some creative aspects to them, but there's also lots of details that you need to learn. Whereas with the Academy of Art, the things that you learn are things like, the programs they offer are like computer-aided design, fashion, building your clothing. They have basic studio arts programs, and film programs, and so yeah, there's a lot of overlap, and yeah, you need to learn technical, but the difference is that the Academy of Art is an art school, and so you learn to train as an artist, and you don't learn to train as a technician. And so that was kind of luck that I kind of ended up there, because it wasn't about lighting ratios, it wasn't about f-stops. Yeah, you need to know that, but you need to first figure out what looks good and what works for your vision, and I think that was instrumental in kind of developing who I became as an artist. And so, you know, obviously I believe in secondary education or post-secondary education. Otherwise, I wouldn't teach. But you know, learning just kind of for the sake of learning and experiencing, and those are things that I really value. And you know, that's part of what got me where I am now. In terms of favorite things to capture, animals, absolutely part of it. Motion is definitely a part of that. I showed earlier the picture of the cat that was kind of moving this way and that. That's kind of the ideal sort of animal photography for me, because it shows things in a way that you just don't normally see. Even if you're just watching something, you wouldn't necessarily register that because it happens so fast. So those are kinds of things that I enjoy. But really, there's not one nature or you know, animals or anything that I would want to do all the time. I'd like to have some variety in my life. So thank you all for asking me questions. It's always fun for me to kind of think about and talk about my work. Hopefully you found some value in it. Again, you know, I really don't see this being any sort of final exam material here, so don't spend time studying these videos. If you have any questions, things that you'd like to follow up on, by all means ask me questions. And I know we're getting to a busy part of the semester, so you know, if you want to reach out after the semester's over, absolutely you're welcome to do that. You know, since this is the last lecture here, I wanted to take a moment to say you know, thank you very much for taking the class with me. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you, and you know, the first time I go through a class, you know, there's always some kind of gnashing with teeth and kind of wondering, you know, what's the best way to take a course, and so you know, in that aspect, you kind of get the rough draft version of it, and I apologize for that. Hopefully you found some interesting interesting lectures here along the way, and I've hopefully introduced you to some new art and some new ideas. Certainly, if you have any questions about anything we've covered, let me know, and I'm happy to discuss anything in much more depth as an intro to art class for non-art majors. I kind of feel like it was my job to introduce and not really go into depth, but you know, these are the kinds of things that I enjoy talking about. So by all means, if you want to continue the conversation after class is over, I am very open to that, and just let me know. It's been a pleasure having you all in class. Best wishes for all your future success, and good luck with your final exams.